Ontario and the federal government finally crossed the finish line this week on a deal with Stellantis. The automotive giant will resume construction on an electric vehicle battery plant in Windsor, Ontario, after months of negotiations. The new deal is worth $15 billion in tax breaks. $10 billion of that will come from the federal government and $5 billion from Ontario. And while negotiations lock down Stellantis, Ontario will also be covering 1/3 of the incentives for the Volkswagen plant in St. Thomas. Politicians are calling this a generational investment in the future of Ontario's auto sector.
We know that there's going to be a lot of benefits for Brampton, for Windsor, for southwestern Ontario, for Ontario as a whole and as a nation, because for me, the more we bring these international players, the more people want to come in Canada.
We get this built, get all of these people employed, and certainly cement our place as the auto capital of Canada, because we've got great things to offer here in Canada and in Ontario with all the critical mineral supply chains that we have. We're just at the beginning of something that is going to pay dividends for decades and decades for all of Ontario.
Vic Fedeli is Ontario's Minister of Economic Development. He is currently in Japan. Vic Fedeli joins me now. Hello, sir.
Good day, Brett.
So this deal comes in at $15 billion in production subsidies, $10 billion from the federal government, $5 billion from the province. Why did the province end up agreeing to this when previously your position was that you were already paying your fair share?
Well, the only way the feds could have done this deal with Stellantis is by Premier Ford stepping up and stepping in and providing the remaining portion of the subsidy. And so we think this is a great deal for Ontario. Again, it's not as if you're writing a check. It's more of a tax subsidy that will take place only if and when the batteries are made here, and it basically matches the United States deal as well.
So I'm going to press you for a little bit more information on that. What was it specifically that convinced Premier Ford to change positions and offer some concessions that previously appeared to not be on the table?
Well, it's the jobs. I mean, think about where we were only a few years ago in Ontario. We were losing jobs in the auto sector, and we looked at what we needed to do, and we began by lowering the cost of doing business in Ontario. And over 2.5 years, we went from zero investment in auto to $25 billion, and that has saved 100,000 auto workers in Ontario. And now that this Stellantis deal is on the table, we've got 2,500 more employees there. We've got thousands of jobs in the supply chain. All of those are at risk to be far greater to the supply chain than doing it. We've got 700 parts makers in Ontario, 500 tool and die and mold makers, 400 connected and autonomous companies in Ontario. All of that supply chain relies on these jobs being available.
All right, and on a somewhat related note, other big news out of this was that the Volkswagen deal in St. Thomas was signed off on, but appears to have been reopened to get Ontario to pay more. So again, what led you to reopen this deal and sign on to picking up 1/3 of the production subsidies at the Volkswagen plant?
Well, again, these are more of a tax deferral. So when you think about, you're not actually writing a check, you've got those investments that come into the province. You have the companies putting billions of dollars into buildings in the ground, creating thousands of jobs, and we'll wait 10 years before we start collecting the tax. That's really what it's akin to. Mm-hmm. So it's important to the 3,000 employees who will be hired at Volkswagen, the tens of thousands of employees who will be making components for these battery companies. So we've got quite a great future ahead of us in addition to the $25 billion that we've already landed here in Ontario. We've got billions more now in prospects for companies who supply the battery companies that are here.
Now, altogether for these two deals, it's about $28 billion combined from the federal government and the Ontario government. That's a lot of money going to two companies that are both very profitable international car makers. So what do you say to Canadians who may be struggling to put food on the table to justify this level of investment?
Well, it's created thousands of jobs. When you think about the supply chain now, for the first time in 120 years, Northern Ontario will be included in the auto sector. We're going to be mining lithium. We're going to be processing lithium. We're going to have billions of dollars of investment, thousands, tens of thousands of jobs created in the entire supply chain. So for those families that you're speaking of, this is a great opportunity to be part of the auto sector and join the over 100,000 workers that are already there. And again, this isn't writing a check to those companies. This is foregoing the tax revenue from them, so that we'll eventually collect taxes for the next generations from these companies. But we can wait those 10 years because they're still putting billions of dollars into buildings in the ground.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I want to ask about your activity right now in Japan, where you're advancing Ontario's critical mineral strategy. What is your sense on whether these deals are gaining the international traction you had hoped to market Canada as a destination for this sort of investment?
Well, this is fundamental to the deals that we're looking to do. When you think about the LG Stellantis deal in Windsor at $5 billion, the Volkswagen deal in St. Thomas at $7 billion. Each of those companies now, they assemble the batteries. They don't make the components. So we're here in Asia looking for companies that make components. These will be unusual words for many of us, but it's cathode, anode, separator, copper foil, electrolyte. These are the type of businesses. Each of those phrases that I just said, those are billion-dollar companies that we're trying to attract to Ontario and fully expect to be successful. So for a $7 billion plant, we hope to bring another 5, 6, 7, 10 billion in suppliers to make the components for these companies. So that's what we're doing here, is looking for those component manufacturers.
And I think I'd like to end by turning to the politics around this whole deal. One of the things that struck me about this was the apparent warmth between Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland and Premier Doug Ford that seemed to help get this over the goal line. How did that figure into getting this deal done?
Well, the Premier does not play politics. This isn't about politics. He'll be the very first to tell you this deal could not have been done without Premier Ford stepping up and supporting the federal government. And I think he's proven that he's been relentless in protecting Ontario jobs. And I think, the fact that we're all in the auto sector is proof positive that we'll do everything that is necessary to protect the workers in Ontario. In this case, it was workers in Windsor, workers in Brampton, but really workers right across Ontario in the entire supply chain. So this is really a new auto pact and a very historic week for Ontario.